right, Madam Chair, I see the notification that we are live. And the meeting is now being recorded. If I could just ask the commissioners when you speak to provide projections so that the audio is able to pick up your voice.
Okay, so it's 12:15 on February, what is it today, 16th, 2022. Call the meeting to order. We'll do a roll call now. Becky, we're gonna do it
Sure. Chairwoman Shannon Murphy,
here.
Vice Chairwoman Marilyn Borja,
Present.
Commissioner Christopher Cruz,
President.
Commissioner Dr. Robert Jack is absent, Commissioner Daphne Leon Guerrero,
Present.
and Commissioner Meg Takenko is absent. Madam Chair, with 4 out of 6 members present, you have a quorum.
All right. Now we'll go to the agenda in a minute. So this is the session where we had 2 meetings. Is that right? Yeah, so there's 2 different.
Also have the minutes projected on the screen.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda first?
I move.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Bill? Okay, the agenda's been approved. And then the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to look at those? Yeah. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? The minutes? Okay, to approve.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay. The minutes are approved. And then we're gonna go to reports.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. To start, we appreciate this opportunity to present a few updates to the commission, starting first with the website and e-learning portal. We had a request for quotation prepared and disseminated on January 5th to 5 known vendors. On January 19th, 3 proposals were received when we closed the request for proposal, and the lowest responsible and responsive vendor was selected, which is 90 Design LLC. We've been in early discussions with this proposed vendor. They have a web tree, including all the commission information, as well as some design ideas for the commission's logo, which they're currently preparing an update for us. So we've last communicated to them on January 9th. So we're due an update sometime today. I will provide that to the commission once it becomes available. The timeline they've provided our office is about 60 days from their contract in order to complete the performance of their requested activity. Down to procurement training, we were able to confirm that 2 personnel received passing scores for the final procurement module. So we're now level 4 purchasers, myself and Pamela Baza. We are intending to send 2 additional personnel, which the new hires, through the same procurement training so that all office personnel are fully certified to conduct those types of procurement. For the lease agreement, following the commission's December meeting, we proceeded with preparing a formal invitation for bid packet. This was published on the Guam PDN on January 31st, with the bid opening set for February 15th. An assessment of the proposals and action by the commission will be discussed under new business later at this meeting. For legal counsel, as a reminder, December 27th, the governor signed and enacted Public Law 3667, allowing the commission to secure legal services. So immediately thereafter, what we recognized was an RFP would have been somewhat of a lengthy process to secure counsel. We intended to pursue a small purchases for professional services avenue. We did that. We solicited what was called a statement of qualifications from the government. We sent that letter to DOA. They provided a response that they had no such support to lend the commission, which then opened us up to seek private counsel. We sent out requests to 3 private firms. Of the 3, 2 provided us with their responses for evaluation, and 1 determined that they were not interested in submitting. Of the 2, 1 was selected and awarded, and so I'm pleased to present from McDonald Law Office, our new legal counsel, Attorney Joe McDonald.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
So
Glad to have you aboard.
Thank you.
Attorney McDonald will have an item later on under old business, the ethics complaint procedures, where he'll have a formal presentation to the commission. But welcome aboard. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
For the,
Well, on that note, could you
Sure.
just acknowledge the presence of Commissioner Hank Tekenko?
of course.
Thank you.
So the record will reflect the additional commissioner has joined us. Thank you, Commissioner Tekenko. For the ethics training workshop, when we started the calendar year 22, we completed an additional 5 workshops with 234 government officials successfully going through the ethics training mandated by law. We currently have all workshops scheduled in February and March that are fully booked. We've had to take down our registration portals, so we're at max capacity for everything leading up to April. And we still have enrollment that has, we have some levels of enrollment April through September. We expect, based on this performance, that we're going to get max enrollment for every workshop up until the end of the fiscal year. So really good.
Once a week.
Yes, we offer them once a week. For recruitment updates, I'm pleased to also introduce, this is a very exciting meeting, our 2 new recruits. We have Mrs. Shannon Affligui and Mr. Ruben Bagarin to the commission. So Mrs. Affligui is a graduate of the university with a background in criminal justice and public admin, and she also concurrently serves as the first lieutenant in the U.S. Army Reserve as a logistics officer. Mr. Bagarin is also a graduate of the university with a concentration in international business, finance, and economics. He most recently served at the General Services Agency, which is the procurement agency for GovGuam. So he has a good handle on that aspect of our performance and is ready to go and supporting sound purchasing for our commission. So welcome. Chamorro translation. In preparation for Chamorro month, which is in March, I had reached out to the commission on Chamorro language to clarify if the existing Chamorro word used for the commission is correct. So they provided us with 2 alternatives. As you know, we've been using Comisión de Disciplina Guahan, which is more of a discipline translation. The commission on Chamorro language came back with 2 options. The first one is Comisión Ikinihan a Reglamento en Gobierno en Guahan. And the second is Comisión Ikinihan a Reglamento en Guahan. So the first would be plain translation, commission that would bring order to the government of Guam, known as government. And then the second translation is to bring order to Guam. We just removed the government because it's already assumed that we're a government office, that we would service the government agencies. So that's on the commission. Now that that's presented, if we wish to adopt the change and of the 2 options, which was the preference, we can start formalizing that in all of our legal documents, that we're no longer a discipline commission, but more of a guide and order commission.
I like that.
So of the 2 options, was there a profession, either commitment or without the commitment?
My personal is okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, easier to say too. Okay, so no objections. We'll start to make those corrections on our language and have that reflected as Comisión Ikinihan a Reglamento en Guahan. Yeah. We'll have
And it'll be like our website.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be on our website and all the corresponding information. All right, but I was really glad to have that in preparation for
Good, I'm
tomorrow.
glad you did that.
To the budget now, you have a summary of our fund balances as of today. Under the 21 account in the Budget Act of 22, they gave us a continuing appropriation of all funds we didn't expend. We could continue to expend it up until September 30, 2022. So the fund balances are reflected as $1,196.28 under contractual, $100 in supplies, and $3,775.85 under miscellaneous. The subtotal balance available for FY21 is $5,072.13. For FY22, we just have $1,773.75 available under miscellaneous. So the subtotal is consistent with that amount. What is already been encumbered are all the personnel costs leading to the end of the fiscal year. So that's paid for. This is just amounts that are available that have been identified for anything else.
No, it's gonna be my question.
Okay. Even the rent has been already set aside and legal contract has been set aside. So the amounts you're seeing is just everything we haven't committed to any other foreseeable function. Under the revenue account,
This is the count with the funds from training.
yes.
Okay.
So under our revenue account, which is the proceeds from our ethics trainings, we have, if I may pause, well, Dr. Jack,
Hi, Dr. Jack.
well, let the record reflect that Commissioner Dr. Robert Jack is now present for the meeting. We have our board here. So under contractual, Dr. Jack, I apologize, we're on the executive director's report and we're on the last item. So I apology for failing to include a page number. After contractual, there's miscellaneous, which is $8,370. The grand total for the sum of all three fund accounts are $20,715.88. And I did leave a note at the bottom that this does not reflect the funds that we were able to receive for all training starting in January. We have an extra $12,160 that has been collected but not placed in the expenditure account for us to spend. So that will be typically loaded in a somewhat periodic schedule. DOA has requested that we make those requests not as often, not like monthly, but perhaps semi-monthly or even annually. But whenever we find the need for the funds, I can always request DOA to load them into the account.
From the revenue.
Correct. So we included the 12,000. Our total available would be $32,885.88. And that's just real quick math. Hopefully I computed that correctly.
Can you confirm for 2022, it starts till September?
That's correct.
End of.
Yes. Which is prudent. The legislature was not able to fund the full budget request, so at least it shows that we're really using the funds. There's no excess projection that we've not been able to account for.
So can you tell me, for each class, you got 50 people, and they are each paying how much money per person? Is it
$80.
$80.
Right.
So every week we're bringing in how much more money?
It would be, if on average, yes, we charge $80, but it costs the commission about $9 per student
Yeah.
to pay for the instructor.
Right.
That might jump up to $18 if we instead hired Attorney Camacho
Yeah.
instead of the UOG agreement. So on average, we would get about $54, $56 per student, which is enough to support the shortfall from the government appropriation that we didn't receive. Yes. But again, I mean, that's still, I think, a healthy amount. If the commission determines that it needs to make additional purchases, it can and knows what object categories it has available. There was a question that I think we ought to inquire with legal, and that was on the use of the revenue fund. So I can present some information about the establishment of the fund, and maybe if this is an opportunity, I could just expound on where the clarity is needed. So when the legislature updated the ethics training program, they put in place that the commission could charge for tuition fees, etc. We determined that all of those funds that are collected should be deposited in the special fund created for the Guam Ethics Commission, which is the Government Ethics Fund. There is separate legislation, separate statute that created this Government Ethics Fund. It was primarily set up to receive deposits when public officials failed to comply with the Sunshine Reform Act, and the Superior Court of Guam issues them a fine of $1,000. So within the Sunshine Reform Act, it defined that all proceeds collected from officials who failed to comply with the Sunshine Reform Act should go towards supporting ethics investigations and audits of financial disclosures. So where a little bit of ambiguity is, we're depositing funds that aren't associated with these fines. They're instead fees for the workshop. So I didn't know if we needed separate legislation to authorize the use, or if the use is supported through, right, through the statute that established the commission, which said the commission could charge these fees to support the cost of holding the workshop.
So, I'm gonna give the typical lawyer answer. I don't like to give a bad answer, so I'd like to review the statutes.
Sure.
And come back with my recommendations on that. Especially if we're talking about the Ethics Commission. I want to make sure that we're operating within what the statute says. So I guess that's my long way of saying, I'm gonna have to take a look at that.
Look into it.
Sure. Sounds good. And so to support that, I'll prepare the information we have available on file, including the relevant statutes that presented. What has authorized the commission use of the special fund is within the Budget Act of 22, the legislature included a section that authorizes the Guam Ethics Commission to use all funds within this special fund for the purposes of the fund. So we're hoping that this will clear up. So far, we've not used anything in the revenue fund except for legal contract, because we understood that if the plain definition of services to support ethics investigation and audits of financial disclosures, then legal meets the standard provided to us in the statute. We're just looking for now an expanded use of the fund to cover operational shortfall, which was what was intended. So to some extent, even the memorandum of agreement with the university, although we were collecting funds from this ethics training and we thought we could use it to pay for the cost of the contract with UOG, we didn't encumber because of the hesitation to do so. Instead, we've encumbered the cost of the UOG contract under our FY22 operational fund, since that's a more broad use of our appropriations.
Have we paid UOG anything?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So according to the UOG agreement, we would make payment after they conclude 6 successful workshops, and then they would invoice the commission. But the funds have already been encumbered, so on the system, it's set aside. It's not reflected as funds available. Any other questions on the fund balance report? Okay, so that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Okay. We can move on to the old business. Which the first thing is our evaluation of Japanese performance. I don't know, what do we need to do with this? We already did the performance evaluation, right?
I wanted to ask Leo, would it be prudent for the commission to then enter an executive session under the Personnel
Oh,
Management Relations Act to discuss the evaluation?
I will wait till we get down.
My short answer is I don't think you're allowed to discuss salary or personnel matters outside of complaints under PERMA in executive session. Executive session should only be used for either emergencies or potential or actual litigation.
Okay.
Well, I thought it was for personnel matters.
No, that's why the folks at the CUC or PUC got in trouble,
Oh,
right? Because they were discussing salaries of the GM, if I'm not
in
mistaken,
executive
an
session.
executive session, and then that caused a lawsuit by the AG's office. So I would want to put you guys in the same sort of issues. So I would say let's avoid having that discussion in an executive session.
So we should discuss it now then?
Sure.
Yeah.
So thank you to all the commissioners for submitting your evaluations we received. Out of 6 commissioners, all 6 have provided their responses. What we've provided on sort of landscape format is a summary of each of the questions and with each of your responses, and then corresponding average score for that particular question. So you'll find that in certain questions, there was an average score of a 5, which is outstanding, and in others, 4.6 or 4.8, depending if 1 or 2 commissioners had rated 4, while others rated 5. At the very last page, you'll find the average of all scores, and the average of all scores is 4.9 out of 5. So
Good.
I do appreciate the commissioners providing feedback also with the comments. That's definitely going to give good direction on areas of success, which I hope to continue in, and then the areas of continual improvement. So that will be most helpful for me to reflect on how I might be able to proceed and continue the success, but also improve on the areas of concern, if any. And I don't know if there were any other comments or feedback from the commissioners that they'd like to share. It's pretty much open for this point.
Well, we wouldn't be here without.
No, I just apologize for the shift in font for at least my part. Not sure what caused that.
Oh,
I think it's when I converted the Word document to PDF.
It's just been really, for me, it's just been really great having Jesse because he really knows what he's doing. We were all struggling with, how to move forward, but with his leadership and we really made a lot of progress. And we all know that. We've been here, before all this started, so we're really happy. with Jesse.
Yeah, I echo that.
It was an elephant that we were trying to chop away at. So thanks for putting, a lot of these things, into solution, in a very professional, organized manner.
So very
You've
ethical.
done an excellent job.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you all for your continued support. I've gotten a lot of direction also from the commission and a lot of great opportunity to work with our chair. She's been most available, which has been tremendous. When we're on the same page, we're able to move along faster.
I
And
text him at like 6:30 in the morning. Did you read this news story?
so it's been a delight, and definitely I hope to maintain fostering this great working relationship with the commission. It's just been a real pleasure. It is the first of its kind, I think, for your role as a commissioner, and I understand the gravity to our role here in executing what has been a desire, which is a nice, open, transparent, and trustworthy government. So I hope that we can maintain that throughout. So I do know that there were 2 questions typically that are done, but I don't know if it needs to be set as president, which is a retention question of my employment, and then the question of salary if the commission warrants a pay adjustment, or that's on your call.
So she will just do a vote on those 2 questions, or? Yeah,
Right, it would
okay.
be a voted discussion.
Everybody here in favor of retaining Jesse?
have
keep
to
them?
move.
Absolutely.
Or if we don't, then you guys are.
So just for the record, if we could get a formal motion and a second, and then the question call.
And we volunteered to take the seat as executive director. I'll second that.
All in favor? Anybody want to clarify? No. Okay, you're
Not
retired.
yet, not yet.
But for the salary adjustment after 1 year, would that be, I don't know really what GovCon's policy is as far as, I mean, you had a great review, but is this after 1 year? Do they,
Yes,
Dorothy?
as long as, and legal can concur this, as long as you're not authorizing any fact pay that's not explicitly authorized in statute. So if there is a vote for an adjustment of salary, then that would be effective on the action of the board, which is today. And then we would work it out with payroll and DOA.
Is there a schedule that is normally followed when it comes to these merit increases by agency, or do you, is it just,
It is up to the commission.
okay?
Since I'm in the unclassified service, the commission will technically set the salary. And then we would find, I know Department of Administration did an evaluation of the position and assigning a pay grade.
Mhm.
So we would find whatever is the closest to the desired salary and then match it.
there's like a step increase on that?
Do we know what your pay grade is and the range of that pay grade?
Yes, I can present that.
We can do a comp ratio and range penetration. Figure out what-
Because when we were first setting up, we worked on the job description and we gave it to them and they told us where he fit in.
And is there a standard merit percentage that goes into effect? Is that something we have to determine, or is that something that?
So for the definition of pay adjustment, it would typically be classified employees that are merit-based recruited have a step-by-step, and then there are calendar days counted.
Okay.
For unclassified employees, it is set by the commission. So I will show the table of the pay range, and then you can determine your desire for what it should be, and then I will present it to DOA for action. This is really uncomfortable. I don't know who else can facilitate this.
Point to the big number.
So this is the executive pay plan, which of course DOA had assessed the roles and responsibilities for the executive director of the commission and had rated me at an EP scale. Yes,
Which is executive.
pay grade 2, yes.
Yeah.
I'm currently at the lowest point, which is step 1. Then the commission can decide which is the most appropriate step to take.
An ET there?
Don't include one.
Oh, there, yeah. So we could have them go up to step 2. Did you want that much money or?
Don't have to.
Are we considering the EMS or ER? No,
Do we have to?
So it's a,
To provide insight too, I know we haven't established this yet, but to compare similar positions, namely in GURA, Port Authority, typically executive directors have been ranked on a scale from 1 to 5, similar to what you've done. And each score was correlated to a percentage adjustment. So a max would go up to 5 or 6% if they got an outstanding score. And then we would find what would be the salary that reaches that level.
do you have those parameters? Because we kind of follow something similar, although, yeah, I guess it depends. The step between 1 and 2 is about 3.7%,
Yes.
8% of an increase.
Right. So I think if you were to compare would be same pace step. If I got satisfactory, it would go step one. If I got outstanding, up 2 steps. Maybe would be the recommendation. Yes.
Looking at an average score here of 4.94.
Yeah.
Which is,
It increases up to about 7.7% of the increase on step one.
And we can afford that in our budget?
Yes.
Anybody?
But again, it's a design. You don't have to. It's purely what the commission.
Is it on?
Yeah, I think somebody who does a good job should be compensated and get a pay raise. One step, and Jesse's done an outstanding job, so I think he deserves 2 steps. That's just my 2 cents.
This year is gonna be the year we're doing investigations, a lot that's gonna be happening.
I'd say following past precedents and also your performance, which was demonstrated here, I would agree with Dr. Jeff.
yeah, I mean, if it's up to us, I agree with what Dr. Jack had just said. 100%.
So would be a motion.
Make a motion to increase Executive Director Jesse Kang's pay from step one to step three. Effective immediately, today.
I think it's gonna be effective as of the signing of the
Oh,
personnel
I
action,
see,
Oh.
okay, got it.
Okay, well, that's fine.
looking at past the precedent that the AG is following these days.
Okay.
Do we need the motion?
I made the motion.
Anybody want to-
Listen,
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody object? No. Okay, motion passes.
Thank you, commissioners. You really do appreciate your support.
For suffering, for.
I know.
Well deserved, I think more, but we gotta go eat. Well deserved.
Yes, I think
Outstanding.
commissioners has just truly been generous and really appreciate the support here. I'm gonna go back to share my screen.
And we're gonna talk about the ethics complaint procedures now.
Correct. I'll turn the floor over to Attorney Joe McDonald. He's our legal counsel recruited by the commission and he'll be conducting today's presentation.
Well, hello, everyone. It's been a long time, I think, since you guys have finally had a lawyer
Yeah.
to look at that
Ever.
much.
it's the first time.
Ever.
Very, very dense reading, and I tell you, it was dense reading for myself, especially trying to put it together with what I know about administrative law. You know, I want to backtrack a little bit on what I said about executive session. Of course, much of the commission's work will be actually in a confidential setting. And so within the open government law, you have the executive session as the ability to discuss litigation, but there's also an exception now that you guys are going to have, which is to conduct some of these hearings and board deliberations in a confidential setting. And the way I envision that is we'll go into executive session. Now, whereas executive session, and this is sort of a getting too far into the weeds, executive session under the law expires, the confidentiality expires in 6 months. And everybody thinks, well, after that, does that mean we everything gets unsealed? No, there's actually an exception within the open government law about, within the Sunshine Act, which says that if you enjoy a privilege, that privilege remains notwithstanding the 6 months expiration. What I'm saying is the following: the 6 months is the first milestone that we go by in keeping this confidential. But because the statute requires that it remains confidential, then that it remains confidential for the remaining period of time, which is for the rest of, as long as it's a record. With the exceptions of if there's any referrals made to, for instance, the CSC or the Attorney General, if we think there's criminal conduct that's afoot. So that's my short way of, you know, how lawyers always give caveats to their own opinions. So I'm going to give a caveat to what we were asking in the executive session. Now, I did spend a great deal of time looking through the statute and trying to match up with the other requirements under the law, including the AAA. AAA is the Administrative Adjudication Act. And usually if there's no procedure set within the statute, you look to the Administrative Adjudication Act to sort of guide you to how to have some of these hearings. But at the end of the day, really what we're looking at is notice, opportunity to respond, a due process that's rooted in law, right? And a fair and balanced tribunal that's going to review the charges. I'm getting ahead of myself, so I want to go ahead and move to the next section. Really, what I see in the process, there's 3 steps to this. One is intake. Okay. The second step is preliminary screening, and the third step is commission review. With an intake, because everybody's, you know, the way it works usually is, we can go back to the first one still. The way it usually works is, you know, so people are coming in, oh, there's something unethical going on, and we don't know if there's actual subject matter there that we can deal with yet, right? So, but you don't want to discourage anything. You sort of want to take everything in and make sure you have the full book of business so that you can say what you looked at and separate the wheat from the chaff. So the initial processing is a complaint by the complainant or the board. The board can actually initiate its own. You read something in the papers, this looks like something we're going to have to take a look at. The board certainly can do that on their own. There's a special required format on the intake. We'll discuss that in a minute. Preliminary screening. The statute involves either the executive director does the administrative initial review or the board does the initial review. Now, to actually get jurisdiction over this, and we'll go over this a little bit more in a second, you're going to need 3 components. One is it's going to involve an employee as defined. Now, employee is not just, you know, the folks here in the commission, but it also includes senators, you know, unclassified folks in the judiciary as well, right? Just not contractors. There's got to be a specific statutory violation in the ethics that's found in the ethics statute, in the commission statute. And then you've got a 3-year statute of limitations. Okay. Now the commission review. This is what I was talking about. There's public meetings where you vote to hear and decide on actually taking on. And we're going to have to come up with redacted and I guess code word or you know, numbers, sequence of cases that you're handling, because remember the requirements are for confidentiality. So when you take a vote, it's got to be sort of like, well, we're talking about matter this, this, and this, and as opposed to naming people and agencies and that kind of thing. Okay. Now the confidential meeting, there's going to be 2 types. As we'll see in the commission review, this is where this sort of departs. When the conduct is completed, then it goes towards a hearing. Okay, if there's a contest. But if the conduct's not completed, for instance, somebody says, I'm thinking of doing this, or we found somebody with their hand in the cookie jar kind of situation, that takes a different track, and we'll discuss that as well. And then finally, once there's a hearing and if there's a vote, and the vote is that there was a violation that occurred, then that ends up in a referral. Okay. Now there's sort of a timing issue with a referral to the CSC, because under the CSC rules, and I forget what there's so and so many days from which management knew or should have known of a violation. So you guys have might come to your conclusions after that time has passed for the CSC to have jurisdiction over the issue. But you still need to make the referral, right? And so the question for them is going to be, well, when should management knew or should have known? And sometimes that can be a moving target, right? Because very subjective. When knew or should have known can be a very subjective standard. So there's something how do we fix sort of these conundrums in the statute? Well, that's what we go through. The other side of the AAA process is potentially you could talk about, we're going to adopt these rules and regulations where we supply definitions where we don't know what the definitions are, and those will actually have the force of law. Okay, and we can take a look at some of those because in my review of the statute, and I did share a memorandum with Jesse. There were some questions of, when you look at statutes, there's language there when everybody reads it. It's like, oh, we know what this means. But to the lawyers, when they take a step back, no, everybody knows what it means, but it still doesn't really have a definition, looks like a duck, acts like a duck, quacks like a duck, but sometimes it's just not good enough for, especially if you're talking about administrative reviews and that kind of thing. Those definitions really should be clarified as we go. And we'll catch some of those as we go on, and some of them can be addressed through ad hoc in hearings. Some of them can be addressed through policy, right? You don't need to pass a regulation to have a policy or a process. Regulation is really just because sometimes boards and commissions, they pass a regulation, but it looks almost exactly like statute. So what did we do there, right? So what you're looking at regulation is sort of to make sure that where there's a gap in the statute, this is how this should be read. And then that becomes sort of how regulatory wise, administratively, this thing will have the force of law. Okay? And I'll go over that as well at the very end. Let's go ahead and go to the next step. All right. So intake starts with a complaint, and it's initiated by someone outside of the commission, a complainant, or it's initiated by the commission by a vote of 5 members. Notice that's not quorum. That's 5. Okay. The required format, it's got to be written. This is actually in statute. And this is where I had a discussion with Jesse. I said, if it's orally relayed, because you don't want to turn away some of the folks that might have valid complaints, you might have a form that you guys adopt, okay, so that it's written. And then they come in and they sign the complaint, right? Or they put it in their words, or maybe somebody here can take it and put it into their words, but you need them to sign it because it's got to be attested to under oath. Because there's consequences also for making false complaints. So they're looking at this attestation under oath for the complainant. Now, if it scares folks away, that's just sort of the way the statute's written, right? So we'll see how that goes. A lot of times people want to make a complaint, but they don't want to put their name in front of it. And if it's a big enough deal, then you should be okay with putting your name in front of it. Oddly enough, there's nothing in there about providing any confidentiality for the complainant. So that could be a rule, actually. That could be a regulation where you pass it. Okay, we're going to have confidentiality for the complainant. Now let's just revisit real quick. When you have a regulation, you guys have a public notice, meetings, public comment on these regulations. It goes to the legislature, it goes to the governor, it goes to the AG. So it comes back pretty much as law. Now in the hierarchy, of course, you got the Organic Act all the way down to the regulation, but it still has the force of law. It can be cited to, it can be used. So wherever there's gaps, then definitely I would recommend that we entertain some sort of regulation, okay? Including if we think confidentiality is going to be a big deal for complainants, for instance, okay?
So Joe, if they were to use our website to type up their complaint,
Oh, that would be a writing.
okay, but they wouldn't be able to sign it unless they know how to.
Well, you could have them, yeah, digital sign.
Otherwise, they could come to the office and sign it.
Yeah, I mean, a signature is interesting in the law, right?
Right.
Signature could actually be, and just getting away from it, but under contract law, sometimes you have like the letterhead is signature.
Okay.
So when you're talking about a signature, really what you're talking about is somebody that says, this is me and I affirm that I agree to whatever is written down here. That's what I intend to be bound whatever is I intend to say whatever is written down here. I intend to complain on the following. As long as you have that, I would say you would have a signature.
I have a question. It's not unreasonable to think that someone might not use their real identity. Maybe an alias, maybe a fake name. How would we address complaints that are presented to us from a person we're not able to verify actually exists?
Like if they did it on the website.
Right.
Well, I mean, that what I would say is not a complaint by a complainant.
Do we not have definitions on what constitutes a complaint? Or like a complaint that we can pursue?
Well, it is defined in statute, and I think maybe if that's the case, if we're not able to verify the identity of the complainant, perhaps it's still presented to the commission, because by a vote of 5, the commission can proceed with it.
Yeah.
That makes sense, correct.
It gives you enough material evidence that there is a problem or a situation there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That might be one way to get around some of the confidentiality issues, is that somebody comes in, they make this confidential complaint with a little bit of investigation. Oh, we see there's some merit to this, right? But I will say, getting back to your original question, the last part of that says, must be attested to under oath. That's got to be by somebody who's saying, this is me, I swear that this is this and this is correct, right? The truth to the best of my knowledge and belief. And so that's why I would say, if it's anonymous in that sense, if there's enough weight to the complaint, you might want to consider it under the commission's authority as opposed to the complainant's. But good question.
Just on that note, do we have a working document or draft? For
Yeah, we
example?
do.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
present that at the conclusion of Attorney McDonald's
Okay,
presentation.
All right, so let's go ahead and head to the next page. Okay, preliminary screening. My thought is that the executive director would do the preliminary screening. Otherwise, we'd be sitting here in very long sessions, right, where you guys are poring over every piece of evidence, and you're paying him good money, so you might as well use it for that. And really, what's important at the preliminary screening stage is that we are sure we can take jurisdiction over this thing. Okay. Now, jurisdiction is going to be established by 3 things: government employee, as defined in the statute. And I said it's more expansive than just classified or unclassified. It includes legislators. It includes folks in other branches of the government.
And also commission board members.
Commission members, right? It's pretty expansive. Statutory violations. If you guys haven't seen it, there's actual, and I think I have it here in my version. The actual ethical violations are prohibitions against gifts, required reporting of gifts, prohibition on government employee use of private information, prohibitions against unfair treatment, and there's going to be a definition for unfair treatment, prohibitions against conflicts of interest, prohibitions on certain contracts with government employees, requirement to file certain election commission reports with the ethics commission, and restrictions on employees post-government employment. You're not able to contract after a year, I believe. So everybody thinks that ethics is really this expensive thing. Well, for the purposes of the commission, it's really limited to these bases, which is the reporting of gifts, your financial reportings, avoidance of conflicts of interest, avoidance of certain types of contracts, and then post-employment restrictions. And that is it.
So when we first started, the senators had told us, if you guys need to update this list, as things are coming in and we think, well, this isn't ethical, but it's not on the list, that they could change the law.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so if you guys
absolutely.
think of anything. I haven't thought of anything yet, but, we haven't got any complete.
Well, I can share from the office then we've been getting a lot of increase if we can offer guidance on things like open government law, so that certain boards and commissions who have often been reflected in the media failing to comply with all the regulatory statutes, what advice we could give to avoid any discrepancies. It's not a function of the commission, but somehow, ethics is somehow just, they're turning to us, right, to ask for guidance on that. So that would be an example of what we're doing on our side to support our eventual presentation to the legislature on our budget request. Is here are the things that we're mandated to review and have purview over. And here are other elements that have been brought to our attention, but lack jurisdiction over, which may be up for consideration if we want to expand sort of the authority of the commission and what they can determine. There are also a lot of complaints about customer service of employees in specific agencies. So there is no explicit prohibition of the list that Attorney McDonald just recited earlier. That would be a challenge, I think, for the commission to hear a complaint about issue with an employee and how they assisted a customer, right, towards the ethics commission.
It's just like bad behavior.
Right.
Would that not be addressed by their own, like, isn't there a hierarchy within, like, for example, if that was a customer service on the private sector, right, the manager or the supervisor would address that. I don't necessarily know that that would be an ethics commission.
I think at that point, probably what we've been hearing is the individual wanting to make the complaint felt that they weren't heard
I see.
or that management failed to address it. And so they wanted to raise it to an independent body to evaluate and determine if there was in fact a wrong that needs to be corrected.
Yeah, I think this is all very good discussion. I would just say that imagine yourself in the other agency. And they're complaining about their employees and, so, let's just see what turns out after all of this. And I would say that if you're going to expand your jurisdiction, it should be incremental, right? Again, I'm just a lawyer. But, you want to make sure you're doing good at what you have. And if you think that you're not touching conduct that where everybody is, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that. Then then you might consider that kind of stuff as well. Now, the other part to getting jurisdiction over this, and this is important because subject matter jurisdiction, you can go all the way to the Supreme Court and somebody says, oh, guess what? You didn't have subject matter jurisdiction. It's gone. Okay. So this is why this is important to get this right at the beginning. The last part of it is the 3-year statute of limitations. Statute of limitations begins to run from the date of that the conduct is completed. So the date that you failed to file a report. That would be when it starts to run, for instance. So it might go, the investigation and everything might go past 3 years, but because you've charged within that 3 years, or you've got the investigation rolling within that 3 years, you made it an official matter within that 3 years, you're still within your jurisdiction. Doesn't mean you have to complete it within the 3 years. Any questions?
What happens when, I think it's come up before, with people who have complaints, but the commission hasn't even been established yet? So something goes back 5 years, 8 years, whatever.
No, that's outside the statute of limitations.
That's good, because we were starting getting inquiries with things from past administrations, we're like, oh my God.
This is exactly what I meant, right? Which is they hear ethics and, oh, let's just dump this pile of doo-doo that we've been holding back for so long, and now we're going to new commission is going to straighten it out. Well, hold on a second, we can't just take action. We've got to make sure we comply with the statute because this is ethics after all, right?
Yeah, great.
All right. Commission review. There's going to be 2 types of meetings, right? There's going to be a vote under public open government meetings, which is what we're having right now, for instance. We will vote to commence an investigation when the violation is not complete. Or you vote to bring a matter to a hearing on the merits after the executive director has reviewed and made some recommendations, okay? Now, the way this works when the violation is not complete, well, let's take the second one first. confidential proceedings, records and proceedings sealed. This is when the violation is completed. So this is when, you know, the way we think as lawyers, right, is A plus B plus C equals violation. Okay, and all of those have to be established. So when A plus B and C are there as acts, then we say that the violation is completed, or it appears that the violation is completed. Now, what happens there is a notice to the employee. This is a formal notice on the commission letterhead, right? Where they have 20 days to respond to the allegations, okay? And if, when they respond, and it's good enough or it's not good enough, the commission will conclude that whether there's reason to believe a violation was committed. And they hold to vote, you folks are gonna vote to hold a hearing on the merits. Okay, a hearing on the merits is like court, okay? Evidence, you bring in, you're gonna have to have disciplinary counsel, right? You're gonna have to give them a chance to bring in their lawyer. They tell their part of the story, okay? Votes administered, and then the hearing's recorded, so it's conducted like court. I mean, it's court-like, very light, right? It's not the formal objections and all that you hear. It's more about truth finding, okay? Now, after all of that, the commission renders a written confidential decision. Okay, and that confidential decision, this is where sort of the jurisdiction is interesting, right? Because if it looks bad enough that it's criminal, you need to under the statute says you need to refer that to the AGs. On the other hand, if it looks like a violation of the employee rules and regulations, stealing, lying, whatever that is, right? If that fits into the ethics violations, that goes over to the, and what might be, you know, as I think about it now, what might fall out of that is you have something that's determined to be an ethics violation, but under the employee rules and regulations, it may not be a violation. So we might have to conduct that type of a gap analysis. Is everybody following that? It might be a violation here, but might not be a violation under the employee rules and regulations. So might have to do a little bit of analysis there to make sure that match up when because you might be referring all of these good cases over and they're like, well, it's not a violation under our rules. That's when we go have a discussion with the legislature thing and say, you know, we need to update some of these if you're going to have some teeth in what the commission's doing. Let's go ahead and go to the next one.
I have a question. So if somebody comes in or goes on the website and they tell us something that they think is unethical, right, right? Then we take that, get their signature, Jesse looks at it, and if he decides we need to look into it further, would one of our employees then like go and try and interview other people and find out what other people say happened? Or how are we gonna, you know, before the commission makes a decision, is there gonna be like an investigation of the complaint?
So are you talking about the initial stage?
Yeah,
No, that's all assuming everything is true.
okay.
Assuming everything is true, right? Then do we have a violation? That's the way I envision it.
Okay. And then it comes.
And then it comes to the commission for a vote on whether to initiate charging.
Okay, so but we don't have to actually do an investigation ourselves, like go interview other people.
Well, I mean, that's jumping ahead of the game.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You would want that, but you would want disciplinary counsel
Hmm,
to do that. Okay, I'm the commission's lawyer,
yeah,
so I can't be judge and jury, right, and prosecutor at the same time.
yeah,
So I would be advising you folks as to how to hold the hearing and what should happen. I've done one of these before.
yeah.
In the last year, some gal from the States had a CPA licensing and application, and she took the test, and then it turns out that she was cheating. Now, the definition of cheating for CPAs is different. Anybody here a CPA? Okay. It also includes that you can't share materials that you had from previous tests. Now, for lawyers, that's all we do is we look at previous tests, right? But for them, it's cheating.
Yeah,
So I went through one of those where I was disciplinary counsel, and then the commission, it was the Board of Accountancy, had their own lawyer that acted as the hearing officer, right? And then they had another lawyer who acted as the commission's actual lawyer. So A lot of lawyers in the room when you're having one of these things.
So the lawyer would come from the employee's place of work, or where would they, or another,
Well, they would hire their own lawyer,
they would.
and then you folks would engage disciplinary counsel,
So we would need two separate councils.
Okay,
right?
yeah. Just for a case.
Just for a case.
Yeah.
But this is where we are.
Yeah, yeah.
So, any other questions along that line? But yeah, to cut to the chase, when I was hired as disciplinary counsel, I actually did my own investigation.
Okay. Yeah, I was envisioning that one of our staff would go out and investigate it, come back with their report saying, okay, this is what we found out.
So if the commission is going to do it and conduct an investigation itself, naturally it could do that.
Okay.
Okay, but I was brought in at a time where I had to finish up the investigation. So yeah, absolutely, there's that flexibility if the commission needs to do an investigation.
Because I know we talked about hiring investigators per se.
Right.
It sounds now that we could just hire separate counsel to more or less handle that.
You could have counsel do the investigation, or you could have staff do that.
Yeah.
And if you have staff do that, I could naturally direct,
Yeah.
right? Or if you needed an investigator, I know too as well.
Or we could get some training so that we could do a deep investigation.
Naturally. Yeah, yeah. You know, because investigation is, how can I say this? If you're gonna be balanced, you need sort of a balanced, investigator that's gonna go there.
Ask the right questions.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I was worried about. Like, you just see, it could become a big mess, right, if it's not done properly.
right.
Yeah.
And especially if you're taking statements when, you know, you shouldn't be taking statements, for instance. If they say, I want a lawyer involved, but they're still asking questions, that type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you are the ethics commission, you want everything to be above board, right? You want everything to be black or white. So that there's never a doubt on what the commission is doing. But absolutely if the question is there flexibility to hire the owner? Absolutely there is.
Okay.
I'm kind of stuck on what it means to be not complete. Or complete. I don't quite get.
Okay. I guess the analogy would be, what type of medicine you practice?
Ophthalmology.
Ophthalmology. So you have sort of an injury, I guess, to, and it's not completely detached. Your retina is not completely detached. When it's completely detached, the conduct is complete, right? The injury is complete. But when it's sort of just starting to fray or tear, that's when it's not complete. So it's sort of the same thing here. When you're talking about, for instance, and let's take a look at one of these. Oh, here's a good one. Let's say we have an employee that just quit the government of Guam, right? And it's a pretty big job that this person had. Okay, now they decide they're going to go work for Cortec or some other, and they do that within the year. It's not yet complete, but we know that it's about to happen. See what I'm saying? The prohibition is a 1 year after you leave government service, you can't go and work for another company. Okay,
That is contracted by the government.
that is contracted by the government. But
And
you,
they did it before you.
but they signed a letter of intent or whatever, they just haven't stepped foot into the job.
Okay, got it.
That's when, you know, if the machinery is working fast enough, you can actually start to, what do you call that? Investigate and very quickly put out a letter saying, you know, we've heard this is that, you know, we've got a piece of evidence here. If you take that job, this will be a violation. Then we issue this advisory opinion. And I didn't mean to mention any company in specific, so I apologize. But just sort of that, you know, going to a government contractor within that year is going to be off limits.
That's really okay.
Okay, you're welcome. And then we'll talk, I think the next is this, yeah, not completed. This is the informal advisory opinion that gets drafted, reviewed, and voted on by the commission. That gets sent to the employee, and the employee will either avoid the violation because of the opinion, right? Or they actually say, screw you guys, I'm gonna do it anyway. That's when there becomes notice, right? They have 20 days to, so it's sort of the process that when it's complete, it then hits on this part of it. Okay, so the employee gets 20 days notice, concludes there's reason to believe there's a violation, it votes to proceed to a hearing on the merits. So that's where we're talking about, we have disciplinary counsel involved. Commission shall render a written confidential decision. Again, 5 members is not a quorum, you need they call it a supermajority. And then it's supported by preponderance of the evidence, which is interesting because usually, you know, the legal nerd, right? You got the legal nerd in the room. Usually a decision of an administrative body is something that's reviewed under what they call substantial evidence, which is lower than a preponderance. Preponderance of the evidence means like it's 50.1% on usage, just enough to tip it over this way.
That's our burden of proof.
That's the burden of proof. Right? Substantial evidence is less than that. Okay. But what this is saying is that it gets proved here by a preponderance of the evidence. So you guys have to have just enough to know, yeah, you know, this looks like it. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, right? It's not what they call clear and convincing, which is when you have fraud, it's clear and convincing. This is really just a preponderance of the evidence. This is just like, you know, there's that one piece of evidence that kicks me over the top. That's what that is. Okay. Post-hearing. Now there's administrative publications. I don't know if you guys realize that, but the commission shall cause to be published yearly summaries of decisions, advisory opinions, and informal advisory opinions. And commission shall make sufficient deletions and summaries to prevent disclosing the identity of persons involved in the decisions or opinions.
And this could be like on our website.
Well, it's saying that cause to be published yearly summaries. Yeah, I guess the website would be sufficient. And I'm reading that last sentence now again, and says persons involved in the decisions or opinions. So it might include the complainant there. Take a look at that a little bit more. After the hearing, if the charges are sustained, it's a referral to the AG, right? And that includes false charges. So the statute requires reporting of, for instance, financial reports for politicians, right? And if some of those charges come up to be false, the complainant is actually now under jeopardy because of the false allegations. In other words, they didn't want the commission to be used during an election season to dirty up politicians, right? So that's why that's kind of there is when I read it, what that's for. Criminal conduct.
That's like something that, you know, when somebody comes and makes a complaint, you should always like notify them. Does everything else, it's found to be false, that they.
Yeah, then absolutely. That should actually be on the form as well.
Yeah.
Okay, criminal conduct, that's a referral to the AG. Former employees, you can actually make those public. And the AG can, some of these include getting into contracts, right? So the AG can undo the contract if you're making a referral about a former employee. And then a referral to the agency that employs the employee with recommendation for action by the agency. This is what we were talking about, sort of, I forget, I think it's 180 days from the time management knew or should have known of a violation. The crazy part is that we could complete something here, make the referral, but it was past 180 days when management knew or should have known. So even though you're making the referral, there's no teeth behind the referral. That's sort of the way it works. Actually, I think it's the 90-day rule now. It used to be the 60-day rule. Actually, it's the 90-day rule, if I'm not mistaken. Next slide. Okay. This is what I wanted to touch out about real quick because Unless sort of you've been involved with a lot of processes, audits, that kind of thing, everybody sort of gets like, is this a process or is it a policy? Is it a procedure? I just wanted to give a quick guide. Statute is actually what's in the law, right? In the GCAs, that's statute. And those are going to give you, especially in the commission, it's the enabling act. The commission shall do this. It's composed of this many members. It's got to publish these materials at the end of each year. It's got to hold hearings. That's by statute, okay? Regulation or rule. It's to clarify how the commission will deal with a matter not clear under the statute. That's really why you have regulations and rules, okay? Example, there's no express waiver of confidentiality when making a referral to the OAG or the agency, right? You can imply it in the statute because you're supposed to make a referral, but how do you keep that confidential? You might need to clear some of that up through regulation, okay? And quite honestly, sometimes it's faster to get it through legislation. The AAA is like notice, hearing, you know, governor has to take a look at it, AG has to sign off on it, and legislature's got to sign off on it. It might be quicker to go through legislation in some aspects. Okay. Policy. Okay, so policy is when you have a discretionary call. That's policy. It's not necessarily that that it comes out of the statute, but the statute says you can go left or you can go right. That's policy, right? How you exercise that discretion. Well, 9 times out of 10, we'll do it to the left. That's policy. Okay. Process. It's the mechanical steps to carry out the requirements of the statute. In other words, keeping a log of all incoming complaints. The reason why I bring this up is because it wasn't in this, but in another agency I was dealing with, they're treating sort of policy discretion like it's regulation or rule, and they're talking about it like it's regulation or rule. And you know, I'm sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop for some other lawyer to come around and say, wait a minute, that's not regulation, right? Although you're treating it as regulation, and then that sort of wipes out their ability to do what they're trying to do. So the reason why I bring this up so that we can be careful, especially at the beginning when we're dealing with a new commission and trying to lay down some good roots, you know, how we're going to actually chunk through these cases. What's really important is chunking through these cases in a predictable manner, and that's gonna stand up to legal scrutiny. And so, you know, you want to make sure that if there's a policy call, we don't call it a regulation, for instance, right? Any questions? I know that was a mouthful.
What I'll present to the commission next is a sample form, which would be completed by the complainant. And then we can have a conversation if the commission is ready with the information provided to them by counsel and with the form if we can now begin accepting complaints, which will go through that process just a little bit earlier.
Thank you for that, by the way, that last slide.
Does that help everyone?
Yeah.
For sure. I tried
Good,
to write
good. Let's try to make it as simple as possible.
So the complaint form was created some time ago. If there are updates that you find are necessary, we can make any updates here.
Just before you go forward, and it says all personal details remain confidential. I think we need to define confidential too. I
Sure.
think that's because in any case, and you know, when we investigate things also on the private sector side for our employees, there are certain things that we try to keep confidential, but of course they have to understand that there may come a point when we have to share certain details. So I think defining what we can keep confidential and what may be disclosed and to whom we may disclose this information to.
Right, right.
Yeah, at particular points of the investigation is important so that they don't have this expectation of complete confidentiality, because we cannot guarantee that depending on the complaint or the
Right.
severity of the allegation.
Attorney McDonald, on the confidentiality, I know that you were saying when the act was completed and the investigation is open, the confidentiality now covers the substance of the complaint. All of that would need to remain with the commission itself. So how would we navigate now if a person were to enter the office, want to fill out this form, and before the commission votes by a member, 5-member, to proceed with an investigation, is that technically confidential because we received it, or would you require maybe a deeper dive into our statute to determine that?
I want to make sure I understand the question. You're saying that somebody's walked in and they have an actual live complaint,
Yes,
and so they lodge that complaint, okay? And so when does it become confidential, right?
right. Because we get inquiries, whether from other entities or even media, asking for names, details about the
Or at
company.
least what agency we're
Right.
complaining about.
And we're not entirely sure that that's disclosable, because in the statute, it requires that any information received and collected by the commission remains confidential and excluded from FOIA. So we're using that citation within our statute to say, since the commission had received this, had collected this information, it's no longer public information until such time the commission decides to make it public.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
If you look at the way the statute is set up, it talks about the commission must vote to release this. The
Okay.
commission must vote to do this, right, to make a referral. So I'd say once it comes in, and especially at the point that it's determined that there's jurisdiction within the commission, I would say at least from that point. Now, from a point earlier from the logging in, that's a policy call, right? You don't need a statute or a regulation for that. I would say you want to treat those confidential as well, because what you don't want is now, 6 complaints came out against this one person.
Yeah.
Right? And little do you know, they just smurfed their complaints. So there's actually 6 of the same complaint against one person. And now it's taken a life of its own. You want to make sure you get a hold of that, so that the way I would interpret it is so that it doesn't interfere with the integrity of the investigation, any hearings, right, any due process that supported the employee. We want to make sure that it remains confidential so that there's no interference with the operation of the commission in its charge, right?
Thank you for that clarification. And to Commissioner Daphne, with that statement, I will make an adjustment to this. We won't say all personal details. What we'll state is that details retrieved by the commission will remain confidential until such time the commission votes to make public that.
Yeah, and let's make sure we're clear on this. The only thing that can be made public is former employees,
Yes.
right? Referrals would be made under confidence, at least right now the way the statute's written. So referral to the CSC or to the agency or to the AGs would remain in confidence under the statute. Former employees are the only ones we can really talk about.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So we're collecting now what would be the demographics of the complainant, who they are, their contact information, how to reach them. And then we begin to receive details, which will assist the office in determining if there is jurisdiction for the commission. And that's the 3 questions. Is it an employee? Was the act performed within the last 3 years? And is the act included in the statute which established the commission, which is gift violations, contracting violations, etc. So we would determine that and then have it signed here. The complainant would sign, and we'd have a notary to attest so that they are fulfilling the statute, which requires this to be made under oath, that what they're sharing with us is, to the best of their knowledge, true and correct.
So then that will automatically eliminate those
Frivolous complaints that,
not only frivolous, but those, our issue with, the identity of the complainant, for example.
Yeah.
Right, or misidentification.
correct. I'm not sure if there are other things that would be required, but when the chair was talking about an investigation, we just left page 2, to retain all the other information that we would collect if it is determined that the staff will perform the investigation with the guidance of counsel on how to proceed with that. And we would provide this in a case file, which will be closed and only shared with the commissioners when the commission convenes to determine whether to proceed or not. And so that's the form we have here. Recommendations and signature. So I think after fulfilling the investigation, there would be preliminary recommendations from the staff to the commission. Then the commission can either review and concur and vote on those recommendations, either aligned with it or vote against the recommendations and take a different path altogether. So that is our recommendation. That's the form we have, and other than the confidential adjustments, are there any other changes that you feel might be warranted on the prepared form?
I think once it's in its final form, if you want to pass it by me to make sure that, it fits. One of the things I'm thinking right now is like, just to enlist the types of violations. So that might be a self-screening thing,
Yeah.
right?
Which one?
With statutory definitions, so that when they actually go, oh, I need to make an ethics complaint. Oh, wait, it's not here. You know, then we can say, well, you know, that sort of solves it. You can submit this, but you can see it's not there.
Okay,
And you may want to do that.
excellent. Yeah, we'll include that as well. Thank you.
Jesse, you mentioned that you're collecting demographic information on the
Oh,
complaint.
I'm just learning. I missed
Oh,
the
just
word.
their name.
Yeah, just
Okay, got it. So we're not,
But how much are you trying to?
would that be of use, like this?
No, I wouldn't think so. But we do want to have a way to identify who's the complainant, because the statute needs us to have it under oath, and to find ways to reach them. Because eventually, if the decision by the commission is to proceed with a full hearing, we would want them present to present, of course, their case.
You know, if I can speak a little bit out of turn, you probably also want internal procedures on how to handle it as a confidential matter, and who can have access to that as well.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna ask. I mean, are those two sentences on top there, like, necessary on this form? For example, where it says the confidentiality, I mean, do we put that in the section, for example, where we list out the potential violations instead of on the top of the form?
Maybe it should just have a number assigned to it or something.
Yeah,
Right?
so like, you know, we
Yeah.
start off with confidentiality per se, and we define it, and, you know, we kind of go through the strokes there, but we just leave it off the top of this form for the purposes of maybe simplicity and ease of use, for example, right? And not to, I don't know, I guess confuse things anymore than maybe already be. And then also on the second page, that, I mean, it looks like that's an internal form. Do we need to present that with the page one, for
Probably not,
example?
yeah.
Okay,
This is
All
just to show a complete record. When the commission gets a packet for their
Okay.
review, they'll have page 1 and page 2.
okay, yeah. And then we probably gonna need to log these down and have a number to identify it,
Sure,
right?
sure,
Or
yeah.
some type of tracking, right? And log, for example, so
We will.
maybe
You want
have
to
that
serialize it.
kind of there, right? And then, yeah, so just, I don't know, maybe just take a look at those two, right, on top of the confidentiality. If it's not completely needed on that form, then, or if we're gonna disclose it or let these folks know somewhere else, then maybe put that somewhere else. Cause it sounds like, you know, we want to kind of do things and say, oh, this is you know, these are the potential ethics violations, et cetera, and then, you know, just have something.
So it sounds more on just the formatting and what would be prudent to have included. If I could ask the commission to, through motion, authorize the executive director through guidance from council to prepare the formal form, which will begin receiving complaints.
Yeah, there you go.
And that way we can handle it here. We'll know that it's prudent and it's based against statute. And that will also say upon the acceptance of that form, the commission will begin accepting complaints. Because I know that it's been a desire of the community. Can they come in already and fill out complaints? And it really is just minor substantive issues on the form. But generally, I think the commission is prepared to have complaints now that council is on board.
I so move.
Second.
Everybody in favor?
All right.
Everybody opposed? No? Okay, that motion
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Attorney McDonald. That was a wonderful presentation. So we'll work together after.
We've been thinking about this. Good to hear you.
In the prudence of time, we'll try to get through the last two remaining items quickly. So I'll start first with the draft policy. This was again presented to the commission at its December meeting. Following the December meeting, the commissioners had requested I include a commission treasurer position and that we identify the roles. So just to go through the policy, general policies that officers of the commission shall be a chairperson, vice chairperson, and treasurer, that any voting member is eligible to become an officer, and that the election of officers will take place at a regular meeting held in January of each year. For the duties and responsibilities, I went through other statutes from other commissions and outlined their positions. So this was consistently used with other boards and commissions on the roles of these officers. Chairperson is to call and preside at all meetings of the commission, call special meetings, serve as ex officio member of all designated committees if such committees are established, appoint committees, and to take any other action consistent with these rules or laws pertaining to the commission itself, and that the chairperson is entitled to vote on all matters before the commission. The vice chairperson simply is to perform the duties of the chairperson at his or her request or in case of their temporary absence or incapacity. And the treasurer is responsible to report on the finances of the commission periodically as desired by the commission, and to present an annual budget to the commission for approval, performing the duties of the chair in the absence of both the chair and the vice chair. So voting for the term of office, it would just be a simple majority of all eligible members, and then it would be up to the commission to decide if you want to institute term limits. Term of office for each position, you can decide if you want it to be a 1-year term or a 2-year term. The commissioners currently serve 4-year terms, and so whichever is most desired by the body, it's your call. And then if you want it on top of the length of the term, if there are term limits. So whether an officer can serve indefinitely until their term expires on the board, or that you would want a new chair serving no more than 2 terms, and then at the conclusion of their second term, we find a new chair to help change the dynamic of the commission itself periodically. So those are the 2 items. Vacancies, it just says if a vacancy occurs, then at the next regular meeting, it'll be presented to the commission to then elect officers. So with that, Madam Chair, I think just an open discussion. Was there a preference between a 1-year term or a 2-year term? So may I suggest 1 year, because we never know, responsibilities can change after a year, and the chairperson might still resign and force us to have an election anyway. So a 1-year commitment would be fair to the individual to accept, so they don't feel like they're overburdened for the next 2 years. And then to the second question, would a 2-term limit be sufficient?
Yeah.
And then get a new election? Okay, so now the question, would the commission like to see an adjustment made and then presented at the next meeting? Or would you prefer to just proffer a motion to adopt the policy with the changes discussed earlier? There's no rush. We can move it.
I have a question on
Yes.
the term of office. We're talking about just on officers or on
Yes.
anybody on the commission?
Just on officers.
Okay.
There's already a term limit for a commissioner. Your term is set for 4 years, and you could not serve for more than 2 consecutive terms.
Okay.
So the most a commissioner could serve here would be for 8 years.
Okay, because I just remember when we started, some people got 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah, we've already been, 2 more people are going up this year, right?
Yes. But again, this is not a policy that needs to be acted on today. If you prefer to get the changes reflected And then we'll represent this at the March meeting, we can, for action then.
When should we have an election? Well, there's any other-
You know, in the interest of time, if we're only gonna make that one change to the voting and the term of office, for example, then I don't see why we can't just adopt
Yeah,
the policy, for example, and then, you know, have it subjected to the change that we've already discussed.
Subject to corrections.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
so we'll have a motion to, accept policy 22 what? One?
322-1.
Yeah. Technically, you see it?
Yep.
Everybody okay with the 1 year term and, term limit of 2 terms?
Yeah, right. Any objections? No? Okay.
Who made the motion? Do we,
Well, no, I was just asking.
Yeah, motion. do we make it?
Yeah, no,
Oh, okay.
We still need to make motion, or are we gonna?
Okay. Make a motion to adopt policy 22, what?
Yeah.
Subject to corrections.
Subject to correction.
Yes.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? We all get along so well.
And then just to clarify, when would the election be public? Did we decide on that, or does that mean?
That would
we
be up
decided?
entirely up to the body. I don't know if the chair had a preference, to ask the question.
Do you want to do it next month?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. The next item on the agenda is for the invitation for bid. It's the final act for the commission. As stated earlier, the commission had engaged in an invitation for bid for office space lease, considering the complications and challenges we've had with our current landlord. In compliance with the procurement law, we've sent out all the notices and we were able to receive just one proposal. We were hoping to present a matrix of various options.
Jeff, do I need to recuse myself? Because I know I work for the company that you.
Oh, yes, we haven't identified yet. So,
Oh, okay. All right.
yeah, this is interesting. Okay, thank you, Commissioners. Well, I apologize. This proposal that was received, since it is the loan proposal, it wouldn't take a typical path for a bid, which is where we would evaluate, we would rank and select the lowest responsive bidder and issue out these notice of intent to award. Since it is just sole provider, what we're saying is we're going to evaluate, and upon our evaluation, determine a notice of award, which we need the commission to concur. And evaluation would be to determine that all of the specifications we require for the commission, that their venue satisfies. We have a site visit due tomorrow at 2:30, which the commission is invited to join if you are available. We can send details. I will show you the new location, but in the end, it came out to 1,774 square feet at $3 a square foot, with a monthly cost of $5,322. Again, all of these funds were budgeted, so it won't reflect on our fund balance scenario because we've already taken out everything for rent with our existing contract and our proposed contract.
As far as our current lease,
Yes.
how long is what's our obligation within our current lease?
Great question. I saw council's guidance on this. What we know is our current lease, technically it doesn't exist because although we issued out a lease contract and a purchase order, the vendor has not acknowledged either. So we're technically on a month-to-month lease with the current space we occupy. If the commission agrees, this has been, I think, our due diligence to make sure everything was prudent. We had, again, gone out and done everything in accordance with the procurement law. If we select this vendor, we can determine an earliest move-in date of March, and that would terminate the existing lease from February. Any other questions?
Oh, the new spaces, so you didn't mention Mark Webster.
No, because it's still active, we haven't issued out any warrants, we're just identifying the vendor as vendor A
Okay.
and asking for the commission to concur. The staff continue to perform the evaluation to ensure it meets the specifications. But if we determine that everything complies, we're asking the commission to authorize us to issue a notice of award.
With the current landlord, do they have any ground to stand on and go to GSA or whatever and say, we're not doing our due diligence, or we didn't, whatever?
Another excellent question. At this point, no, when this first was released, we had disseminated copies of the proposed packet to several vendors. A total of 3 were emailed and 1 picked up on their own. Each signed an acknowledgement form, which we've registered in our complete procurement record. And we've had our whole procurement record reviewed by a counsel who attested that we had everything in conformance. Since the individual landlord did not, in fact, provide a bid offer, they're not defined as an aggrieved party. They would have to have put in an offer and had not been selected for them to have grounds to protest at OPA. Since they didn't even participate, OPA would not be able to determine a protest because they didn't even offer when we have records to reflect. They were issued the notice on the day it was published, they acknowledged the notice, and they were aware of the deadline.
It was, first notice on the 31st, right?
Yes.
They have 14 days from the date that they knew or should have known that there was an issue with the bid in order to register a protest.
Yes,
So even though they didn't come in as an aggrieved party,
Yeah.
it would still have 14 days. So it's been more than 14 days, I would say.
So the question now I'm asking the commission is a motion to authorize the executive director to issue a notice of award upon conformance that the proposed space meets and complies with the bid specifications.
So you're gonna go look at the space and check all the security and all that
Yes.
stuff first. And
There
then
was only one responsive bidder, correct?
Correct.
so far you think it all complies to the supply everywhere.
What are you paying right now, Director?
We pay $2.70 per square foot for a smaller footprint.
1,000?
Yeah, I think it
That
was.
one's Yeah.
But the new space will also offer the commission its own hearing/board meeting room. As you see, currently we've had to borrow space or find ways to rent out other areas to meet. But this new space will be inclusive of that. We'll be able to have everything in-house.
We were supposed to have a space upstairs there, but we never did it.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Motion to, proceed for the staff to check the compliance. Proceed to, notice of award.
I second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No? Motion carries. All right. That's the last thing.
An executive session, for the record, is no longer required as the commission ended up just discussing this in open discussion under old business.
We don't have any announcements to make. I do have one announcement. I'm gonna go to California in like 2 weeks for medical. I might not be here for a month or so, so you guys might have to do the meeting. Yeah, thanks. That's only. Yeah. All right. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Well, to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
For the record, meeting adjourned at 1:54 p.m.
Yeah.
Oh,